Hey guys, it's Kelly, and I am going to do a mini series called Beyond the Collection. And the collection pack that I am using is So Lovely by Carta Bella. I found this at Hobby Lobby on clearance, and I think I paid $6 for the whole pack. And later on, as I'm looking at it in my craft room, I'm like, you know, why do you do this? Just because something is a good buy doesn't mean that you necessarily need to buy it, own it. And I'm really trying to get better about what I bring into my stash and be just, you know, thinking about it more. So I came up with this idea as I was making this page about using this collection in another way besides the sewing theme that went with it. So my goal is to make minimum of 3 layouts. I would like to make 4 or 5, but I'm only paid $6. So for me to get 3 layouts, it's $2 a layout. That's fine with me. I'm not one of those types that has to use every single bit. So let me talk about what I'm doing with the layout first, and then I'll come back with my ideas for this little series. So I just cut some pieces to back my photo, brought in a doily, which is one of the things that I usually do, and inked the edges with a little bit of the Tim Holtz Distress ink. And I liked that little pop of turquoise, but at this point I have, you know, had the thought that I want to, you know, challenge myself to make at least 3 layouts with this. So I cut that little bit of turquoise out because it was a big enough piece to where I could use it again. And I decided to keep this picture close to the era. And this was mid to late 1970s. And I rescued several of my mother-in-law's photos in a non-acid-free photo album. And most of them that she had were taped on or photo corners. So I thought the photo corners would be a nice little nod in, you know, the framework that she had the pictures. So in keeping with the collection, I decided that it would be fun to bring in some ribbon and trim and some buttons. That trim that I'm using by Making Memories is something that I have had for a few years. I bought it at a yard sale for a phenomenal price, but just had never used it. So this is the perfect time to, you know, use things that I've had in my stash that go with a collection that I really had no business buying in the first place. But so that being said, I'm going to find ways to use it and make it worth the money. And I challenge you to do the same thing. You know, whether it's a birthday collection or you know, a beach collection, find ways that you can use it that aren't necessarily following the theme. So I decided that I wanted to use the lace trim and the rickrack, and as I'm messing with it, I decide that I want to sew it down. The rickrack has been wrapped around for so long that it has wrinkles in it, so in just a second you'll see me rip everything up and I am going to sew it down. Sewing it down provided several different things actually for this. It reinforced the So Lovely theme with the sewing and, you know, with the background and the pattern, and it also straightened out the rickrack, and it just made this layout, when it's all done, have that nice vintage feel that I was looking for. So I use washi tape that I am not going to use, and I use that to put down like my thread ends, and I will pull them out and just tape them down so I don't have to worry about it coming loose. Now back to what I was thinking with this series. I want to challenge myself, like I said, to a minimum of 3 layouts, and I will do those and have those up every week until I am done, and then I will do a video showing the different layouts that I did and seeing how far I was able to go off of the sewing theme and how different I was able to get the layouts to look. So I decided to pull off a couple of stickers. The roses was a perfect fit for this. Sorry, that's what the sticker says, and I'm inking right now too. And the perfect fit is just going to talk about the love between, my father-in-law and mother-in-law. These buttons I pulled out from my stash, and I love buttons and thought it would be perfect for this. And all of these are probably from old Studio Calico kits that I would get, and I wouldn't be able to get all of the buttons used, and so they just went into my stash because I knew at some point they would get used. And I decided to nestle the photo mat underneath the rose. It is so pretty, and it's such a tribute to my mother-in-law that I didn't want to cover the rose up. And so I just took my craft knife and very carefully made a slit wide enough for the photo mat to go in, and then I just inked the edge a little bit to cover up the white, space in between the cardstock. I did go ahead and pop up the rose on the cluster by the photo with a pop dot, or actually the foam tape, just to give it a little dimension. And I pulled these old, I think they're Dear Lizzy thickers. I will have the information on my blog about all of the bits and pieces that I used, and decided that the aqua would be a pretty color just to bring down from that piece of paper that's in the right hand corner. So I was happy that at least with this collection that I was able to pull in things from my stash and get things used that I may not necessarily have used right away. So I decided to ink the edges of the background just to bring a little bit more continuity. And I go back and forth with these buttons trying to figure out if I want to do, that brass tone to bring in some dark color, or if I wanted just to keep the light color with the pinks and the ivories. And I move them back and forth and finally decide that I'm going to keep it fairly light. And I have a stash of embroidery floss from when I used to cross stitch quite a bit. So I just went and found a pinky peach that was close enough to the roses and decided to use that as my stitching thread. And I don't make you watch the whole thing of stitching down buttons because it's kind of boring, and I know that. So anyway, this Cartabella paper is thick enough to where it's fairly easy to stitch on the back. You have to be careful if you're stitching directly through a thinner sheet of paper or a thinner cardstock. And the final thing that I do with this is grab my Heidi Swapp Gold Color Shine and just, sprinkle some sprinkles around the layout, and it adds such a beautiful detail. I do have some close-ups at the end, and if you have any questions or thoughts, I would love to hear from you. Thanks so much.